It's done. So is there a problem? So we are now officially launching this event. Is everything fine? Yes. Okay. So colleagues, can we?
Yes.
I'm looking at my neighbors and people in the room. Sorry for starting a little bit late. We had some technical issues here in the room. So we are now officially launching this event. Excellencies, dear colleagues, good afternoon to who is with us here at the International Environment House. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx or now watching the video of this event. The Geneva Environment Network has the pleasure to welcome you today for an event co-organized with the Sustainable United Nations team. Our session today on the United Nations System's environmental footprint will present the findings of the UN Greening the Blue report for last year, released at the end of December. I am myself Diana Rizzolio, the coordinator of the Geneva Environment Network. And for those who are new to Geneva or not familiar with Geneva, we are a network of more than 100 institutions or secretariats based in Geneva, contributing to making this region one of the global hubs for environmental governance. I would like to particularly welcome the colleagues online who are joining us from duty stations and organizations where looking at sustainability when you are being targeted must be challenging. And we colleagues of the United Nations located in peaceful duty stations stand with you. Today, you will be welcomed by Rie Tsutsumi, who is the coordinator of the Sustainable United Nations facility. She's joined by a member of her team, Jacob Alcombe, who will be moderating the session. We have as speakers today activists that make our organizations walk the talk and fulfill the policies that we are issuing, and the recommendations and regulations that come out of the negotiations our organizations are facilitating. And in Geneva, the contribution in terms of policy to climate actions is huge. Most agencies based here bring their piece and push for more ambition. Many attendees today also represent United Nations agencies and are fully engaged in the UN system efforts to reduce its footprint, whose work is being coordinated by our colleagues of the Sustainable United Nations team. So thank you all, and we have a few here in the room for your important work that is often done behind the scenes. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge also the presence of our host country, Switzerland, in the room, and the support they provide to make the organizations that are based in Geneva and in Switzerland greener. One of the tools we have in Geneva that is supported by Switzerland is 2050 Today, an initiative that supports member states, intergovernmental organizations, and non-governmental organizations to reduce their carbon and environmental footprint. I will finish by mentioning that I represent International Geneva at the Conseil du Climat of the Canton of Geneva. And this week, the Council made 13 propositions to improve the climate plan of the Canton of Geneva and welcomes the efforts of all stakeholders involved, so including what the international community is doing. Again, also something else I would like to mention, this morning I attended the meeting of the Committee of Parliamentary Representatives to the United Nations Environment Programme online and heard the member states, namely France, welcoming the report, the Greening the Blue report that will be presented today and asking to have recommendations inserted in the next edition. And so before I give the floor to Rie Tsutsumi, let me remind you that some more technical remarks, that the summary as well as the video of the event will be made available on the webpage of this event, and the link is available on the screen or shared in the chat for who is online. Throughout the event, for those who are online, you can leave your comments in the Q&A box or your questions, and we will use your questions to feed the discussions after the presentation of the report. So with that, Rie, over to you, and Jacob will be chairing the meeting once you are finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. So not only we are very lucky with the weather today, this event seems to take place in the right timing of the day, as our colleague from France kindly mentioned about the Greening the Blue report. Thank you very much. And we would, of course, like to thank Switzerland for your support to the Geneva Environment Network, as well as many sustainability initiatives in Geneva, Switzerland, and of course, globally beyond. And I would also like to thank Diana and also Jen team to organize today's hybrid event to share information and knowledge. And hopefully we will have a good moment of discussion, which may even more inspire us and colleagues who are present, as well as listening, participating online, to increase their sustainability and reduce environmental footprint. So just to very briefly mention what is Greening the Blue. I wanted to do a little bit of a question to know if anybody have already heard of Greening the Blue in this room. First time to hear? Okay, great. It's great to present to you. And Greening the Blue is a UN-wide initiative to engage and support UN system personnel at all levels of the organizations in the transition to integrate environmental consideration into UN management decision as well as actions. As Diana already briefly mentioned, Greening the Blue initiative is managed by United Nations Environment Program, UNEP Sustainable United Nations Facility. So the acronym is SUN. And SUN facility assists UN system entities to measure their environmental performance first, and then also we would support, depending on the need and request, reduce their environmental impacts, which include, for example, greenhouse gas emissions and reduction of the waste, water use, and wastewater treatment, as well as biodiversity-related issues and pollution, and so on. So SUN team at this moment consists of 7+ an ad hoc assistant from the people. And today I'm here for the second time because this is my second report launch. I'm the coordinator, Tsumi, and Jacob, who would chair this session. And we have colleagues online. And after Beth will present the Greening the Blue report result to you, but also the different experts, for example, Lovisa on the data collection, analysis, and Osa, who is leading the portfolio on environment management system, and communication colleagues, Electra, Noyon, and Yanis from our interagency colleague from New York are online, and they would be able to answer to any your question during the meeting, as well as we are very happy to answer if you have any clarification needed, as well as engage in the dialogue for further improvement or some inspirational comment if you have. So I think I can just pass the floor to you, Jacob, for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rie. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time. I joined in August. Prior to that, I've been a home-based consultant for a number of years, so I was quite excited to get to moderate. I got my watch out. Battery's dead because I haven't worn a watch being home-based for quite some time. I'll point out it's not Swiss-made, so that probably is the reason. Our first speaker today is Beth Padfield. She's our communications strategist and consultant with the Sustainable UN team. Beth is based in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. I always like to ask her how the weather is because it's usually worse than here, although the weather's been quite lovely lately. She began her time as Sun's communications consultant in 2020, and during that time, she's led the development of 4 of our reports, and we're very, very grateful for that leadership and that help. She's created and implemented a new communication strategy for Greening the Blue, helped with the new website, online community space for the focal points where they can share and exchange knowledge and best practice, and has been the project manager for the updated Greening the Blue tutorial, which is freely available on YouTube in, correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, but 3 languages, French, English, and Spanish, which provides an interactive method for learning how you can improve and operate your facility in a more sustainable way from the personal experience or personal level. And Beth, with that introduction, I'd kindly turn it over to you to present the latest results of the 2023 report.
Thank you, Jacob. Am I in control of the presentation now? There's my take control button. Great. Thank you everyone for joining online. If you're in Canada like me, then it's early morning, so always appreciate people attending that early. And of course, to everyone else, also just making the time to listen to what we have to say is greatly appreciated. So I'm going to go through some of the highlights of the data that we collected for this latest edition of Greening the Blue report, which is the 2023 edition. So just some very top level information to give you a little bit of background as to what the report is about. It is the 2023 edition, providing data from the year 2022. The data covers the environmental impact areas and management functions that are identified in the Strategy for Sustainability Management in the United Nations System 2020 to 2030, specifically from Phase 1, Environmental Sustainability in the Area of Management. This edition of the report highlights the environmental impacts of approximately 308,000 personnel and 57 reporting entities across headquarters, field offices, and operations on the ground across the globe. Entity level data is available on our website at the URL that's on your screen there, whereas the report PDF that you will find focuses more on the UN system level data. Some of the key findings from this edition of the report are that UN operations and facilities emitted 1.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent. In total, or that equates to 4.6 tons CO2 equivalent per capita. 7 UN entities have now met or exceeded the criteria for implementing an environmental management system. This is of particular note as, unlike the other areas of the sustainability strategy, the date for implementing an environmental management system at the entity level is 2025. 31 entities have environmental training available for staff, and the average waste generated for the whole UN system was 321 kilograms per person. On greenhouse gas emissions, I have mentioned some of the stats that we found. The report also goes into more detail in showing what were the main sources, broken down into the 3 broad areas of air travel, facilities, and other travel. It also shows the breakdown as the share of the total emissions by entity. As you can see here, the UN Secretariat represents the largest portion of that. In terms of climate neutrality, which is the offsetting of the unavoidable GHG emissions that the UN system produces, 92% of those were offset as of the reporting date cutoff. And we are now using 31% renewable energy from the entities. On the UN Secretariat, because they do represent over half of the GHG emissions, we do provide some additional information about the UN Secretariat, and it's broken down into more details. This year, we have also released a more detailed table that can be accessed either as part of the PDF or a standalone document on the website that breaks down some of the other areas of their environmental impacts. And again, we go and show by the entities that fall under the UN Secretariat what the proportions are. And as you can see, the greatest proportion comes from peacekeeping and special political missions, which represents 87% of the UN Secretariat's total. On waste, as I said, there was 321 kilograms per person. We also break this down in terms of what is it if you were to take out peacekeeping and special political missions. We do that because, of course, peacekeeping and special political missions are quite different from all other entities where you have personnel that are living 24/7, and it has all the impacts from living there, not just doing the work. We also have shown within the report, if you take out the waste from construction projects, so this percentage and this different parts that impact waste do vary quite a bit from year to year as to whether there were major construction projects undertaken or not in that year. On air pollution, the UN system utilized approximately 300 million liters of fuel in 2022. We've begun to try to improve the reporting around the refrigerant use in UN offices. One of the big challenges there that you can see from this breakdown is trying to get UN entities to get better access to even find out what kind of refrigerants they're using. On water, 49 meters cubed was per UN personnel per year. 4% of the water consumed by the UN system is recycled. Part of this area needs improvement around reporting, which we are aware of. The 4% may not be an accurate representation of what is actually happening, but it's the best we have right now, dependent on the data that we are able to gather across the UN system. On biodiversity, it's an area that we are still trying to develop better reporting and better systems for reporting on the UN entities. There has been quite a bit of work in trying to get us up to a level that makes sense for all UN entities to begin reporting on that. The work that has happened thus far includes the UN Common Approach to Biodiversity that was adopted in 2021. In 2023, there was a piloting process for entity-level reporting on screening for biodiversity impacts. We now have some early results on that of the entities that were able to participate in the piloting process, and we will start implementing that across for the UN system so that we can get reporting from all entities. Environmental governance, as I mentioned, for environmental management systems, implementing that at the entity level. The target date for that from the strategy is 2025. So there has been quite a bit of work done by the Sun team and also by the entities to get that done. We have now been able to show year over year, starting in 2020, the improvements that have happened in those areas. And as you can see from the data, we are seeing a steady progress towards implementation, but of course, there is quite a bit more work to do. Procurement is covered under the sustainability strategy. There is already the United Nations procurement team that was collecting this information. So as to not duplicate efforts, we use the information that is reported in the annual statistical report on United Nations procurement to supply this data for the Green the Blue report. There has been, again, some steady improvement that has been happening year over year, where we are able to, based on the data that's from the report, we try to show the difference from year to year to give it a bit more context. So that's a very quick summary of the Green the Blue report and the different areas that are covered both on the environmental impacts and the management functions. If you would like to know more specific to the report, we of course welcome you to go directly to our website at the URL there. That's greeningtheblue.org/reports/greening-blue-report-2023. That would provide you both with the UN system-wide data as well as entity-level information. If you would like to know more about climate neutrality or some of the methodology that's used around travel information, we have direct links to those areas as well shown on the page. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Beth. I just wanted to say how appropriate it was that Trooper, your cat, made an appearance while you were talking about biodiversity. So I don't know if that was staged, but thank you. I'll take, we have a few minutes now for questions. If we have questions about the report or how that report is produced, before we move to the next speaker. Yes, there's a question down at the end.
I'll take the opportunity now since Beth already mentioned one. My question is about challenges in reporting or data collection or availability or measurements. So she already mentioned the refrigerants, but if there's anything else, that would be appreciated.
Great, thank you. Beth, I think we might have Lovisa connected if she wants to speak, but Beth, you want to take the first approach on the question?
Sure. And just as a reminder that Lovisa and Osa, who are here to help answer, will need to be unmuted so that they can say things that people can hear. Yes, there are quite a few challenges that we have with reporting. I won't speak too much because Lovisa, of course, knows much more about that than I do. But some of it really depends on entity capacity. The entities have very large differences in terms of the level of support that they have to do that, as well as their size, be that number of personnel, a number of offices, different locations around the world. So trying to get a level of reporting that all entities are enabled to give to us to the report is an ongoing challenge. The sustainability strategy itself was endorsed in 2019, and we started reporting on it in 2020. So some of it simply from that, seeing how you take the written strategy into the real world and what metrics make sense and are actually reportable. So there's ongoing issues around that as well. But year over year, we are making quite a few improvements. And really, yeah, I'd pass it over to Lovisa if she is able to speak more to that.
Yes, Lovisa, I think you have to unmute on your side.
Did that work?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
Just maybe speak a little bit louder, please. Thank you.
I would like to ask the person in the room to repeat the question because the sound was not great on my side.
My question was about challenges in reporting, data collection, availability, or measurements.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically our inventory covers greenhouse gas emissions, water, and waste. And so we collect data from all UN facilities worldwide in these areas. And for greenhouse gas emissions, we collect data on scopes 1 and 2 of the greenhouse gas protocol, which is basically all emissions resulting from our buildings and our fleets. And then we also look at scope 3 emissions from travel. So this is sort of the oldest part of the inventory. We've been collecting data on relating to greenhouse gas emissions for quite some time in the UN system. And the data quality for the greenhouse gas emissions is actually not too bad. We have great participation from UN entities on this and good support from facilities also in their field offices and so on. Since we have been collecting this data and calculating the results for quite some time, we also have methodology in place to make good estimates and proxies if for some reason data is not available for a year or two. Water and waste are newer areas for us. They were introduced later, and there we're still looking at how we can improve data collection. So currently we have some facilities that are not able to provide us with data on water and waste, but also that improves every year.
Thank you, Lovisa. And just as a follow-up thought, I mean, one of the other challenges is the tools that we have available on our side for the data collection process. There are a number of entities we hope to, I think some of this will be covered by the next few speakers, but that have pretty robust data collection systems, monitoring, metering throughout their operations. Not all of the UN has all that capability. And then the tools that we are using on the Sustainable UN side for the processing and collection can be a hindrance sometimes. And so that's one of the areas where we're actively working to improve in the coming year. I'm sorry, this is my first meeting. Would you mind just saying who you're with and
It's Kaval Beard. I'm an intern with the Environment Management Group.
Great to meet you. Thank you. Any other questions online or in the room? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Merci beaucoup. Bonjour. I'm Régis from French Mission. So happy. Thank you, Diana, for making the link with what France has already said. I'm very impressed by the quality of the study and the report. Really, thank you for these figures that I have read carefully before coming here. It's a huge amount of data to be managed, and it's also difficult to have everybody on the same page with some methodology. Not surprisingly, so I was surprised to see that 87% of the emissions were from the peacekeeping missions. This is for the secretariat part, at least. I was not surprised to see that major part of GHG emissions were transport and facilities. I have a question, so I take it for granted that here it's a technical meeting. I'm not a very high political one. So my question is, of course, you took into account scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and for traveling, I guess you included all the travels from the staff of the UN agencies. Did you consider, and could you consider also the travels of the people who come to the meetings that are being organized within the agencies? What would be the share? Would it be important as compared to what is presently given as results for travels? Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's an excellent question. And yes, the flight data that we report is any of the travel that is procured by the UN agencies. So not only staff, personnel, but meeting delegates. But if I may put Osa, if she's available, on the spot to talk a little bit briefly about the Green Events tool, which is a tool that was developed in cooperation with the UNF Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Gulf Organization of Research and Development, that has some, we're pilot testing now, that does have some guidance in processing of participants that travel and come to events to see to begin to measure that amount of the emissions and what is that impact. Osa?
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you for the question. Yes, we provide an online tool that is available publicly available, and it's called the Green Events tool at greeneventstool.com. Feel free to log on to use, where you could enter your meeting participants and calculate the emissions for both accommodation and travel to the meeting, etc. But the UN system also already includes emissions of participants that we pay for also to attend our meetings. So that is already included in our emissions, the meeting participants that we pay for. The tool, yes, you can make your own user account, and we're currently developing a second version together with the Gulf Organization of Research and Development, as Jacob mentioned. I'm happy to respond to any follow-up questions after the meeting on the tool too. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Osa. I think it's also one of the areas that, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on strengthening the analytics of the data, because we have right now is just one big number, and we're working with I know within UNEP is to develop kind of a dashboard that begins to show staff, delegates, meeting participants, and these things, so we'll be able to begin at least kind of estimate perhaps some of in the broader UN system how much of the impact is from participants in meetings as well. It's a great point, and I've made a note for us to explore that further. Thank you.
If I may comment, sorry, this is Luisa Zelander-Dolph again. I just wanted to point out that there are already a few UN entities that are looking at this sort of on a more sort of voluntary basis. So this would be outside of the formal boundaries of the inventory that we make, but they do still calculate the greenhouse gas emissions related to travel for meeting participants that are not sponsored by the UN system, but attend UN meetings and conferences. So there is an interest from some UN entities already and engagement in these issues.
Okay, well, we can come back to a more technical discussion after the presentations. I think the next speakers will really help provide a lot of ideas and insights, and I'm very grateful and excited to introduce Agnes Losis, who is a senior manager that has more than 20 years of international experience in managing environmental and sustainability issues and really leading change in the business environment. And international and corporate with the UN. Excuse me. With her start in mechanical engineering, she has long focused on quality and sustainability, including greenhouse gas accounting. And we at the Sustainable UN and here at ENEP have really benefited and enjoyed working with her and with Kira, who's here in the room, from the World Intellectual Property Organization. So please join me in welcoming Agnes as she draws on her depth of experience and shares her insights and knowledge with us today. Agnes? I believe you're still muted on your side. I think, yeah, please.
Agnes, you are unmuted, but you probably have not selected the right mic on your device.
Agnes, I think while we figure this out, we'll move on to Adam, our next speaker. Unless you want to, yep. Adam Ostaszewski is a senior energy expert. He's with NORCAP, and he's been deployed to the International Organization for Migration's Environmental Sustainability Unit. He's based here in Geneva since 2020. Adam leads IOM's annual environmental inventory reporting process and is the focal point for Greening the Blue. In addition to improving inventory data quality, his role also focuses on using this data to support strategic planning and implementation of IOM's decarbonization initiatives for its global facilities and operations. Adam?
Thank you, Jacob. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Very good. Let me just take control. Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to present on this topic. Yeah, as you mentioned, I've been involved in the Greening the Blue process for IOM for the past several years, and that's been really fascinating to develop that with the idea that the better quality data that we have, the more that we can use that to make effective decisions at IOM and across the UN system, and to launch strategies for decarbonization and for managing our different waste and water impacts. So here's a quick overview of my presentation for today. The two main things I was asked to focus on are our decarbonization initiatives. So I'm going to go through some of those quite quickly. Hopefully you'll have the slides will be shared with all the audience members, so you know, they can go through some of the details there. And then the second topic will be about plastic waste management. So there's a few examples to be shared, including one that was featured in the Greening the Blue report this year. Just very quickly about IOM, for those that don't know us so well, our mission is first and foremost to ensure the orderly and humane management of migration. And that includes a mandate of protection, looking for solutions to migration problems, and providing humanitarian assistance when needed. We're quite a large organization in terms of our footprint, operating in 174 countries, over 550 locations, all different types of locations, as you see here, including migrant health assessment centers, temporary reception centers, border crossings, and so forth. Our staff has been growing over the past few years, basically in response to increasing migration crises relating to various issues around conflict, natural disaster, and increasingly climate change. So just a very quick snapshot of our IOM's inventory data. You can see here the past 4 or 5 years as we've been, I mentioned staff has been growing pretty steadily since 2018. But you could see here our carbon emissions, water and waste. One positive thing that I'd like to point out is that our emissions per capita have actually have been reducing over the past few years and are currently about 2.6 tons per person per year, which is quite lower than the UN system-wide average of 4 tons. Okay, so now to get into some of the initiatives that I mentioned. The first one that I'll talk about is, very quickly, is some of our work in regarding healthcare facilities. And so here you see, this is a project that we did in the Philippines, in Mindanao. Not only was this a conflict area that resulted in a number of internal migration within the Philippines and IDPs, but also it was the location was such that it was in very remote, difficult to access locations, mostly in islands. And already healthcare facilities tend to be, especially if they're in displacement settings, in conflict and disaster areas, they're typically underpowered. And therefore, the level of access that they can provide of critical services is greatly reduced and compromised. And also to note, the primary client of these healthcare facilities are women, both with children, without children, as well as pregnant women. So the impact to the community actually on energy or lack thereof is very significant. With the help of the financial support of the government of Japan, we were able to do a solarization of 6 of these healthcare facilities. It was actually a very challenging project because of the remote accessibility issue, but also because this was done during COVID. And one of the interesting things that came out of this was we had to develop a remote training program to train our IOM staff to do energy audits remotely. And so we created a standardized, both a training program as well as a standardized energy assessment that we then also shared with other humanitarian organizations. The next example I'd like to mention is in Malakal, South Sudan. And so this is, in Malakal, another significant operation for IOM, given the migrant crisis there. IOM manages a very large humanitarian hub, which shelters over 1,000 humanitarian aid workers from over 35 different locations. This hub provides safe accommodation, safe working space, as well as internet and phone connectivity to again thousands of aid workers year round. And so it's actually a very important resource in the community, again in remote, difficult to access areas affected by displacement. with this particular project, just one thing to highlight was some of the innovative solutions that we were able to employ. One of them was an innovative financing mechanism called the Peace Renewable Energy Credit, developed by Energy Peace Partners. There's some links and additional information in the presentation notes. And so by using this type of financing mechanism, we were able to generate additional capital which was used to fund the solarization of a nearby teaching hospital as part of a community impact project. And because of the way that this financing mechanism works, the longer that we stay and continue to provide renewable energy, basically switch from previously diesel generators to solar energy systems and provide clean energy in conflict-affected areas, we are, after some period of time and producing of this energy, we're eligible for additional PREC transactions, which means additional capital that is unlocked. So in 2023, there was a second PREC transaction was completed, which was used to support the solar electrification of the Boer State Hospital. The next example is decarbonization in our border management facilities. I mentioned that we have a number of border facilities around the world. That also includes at airports, and some of them are visa application centers, and some of them are actually jointly managed between IOM and also the national military as well. So that was the case here in Jordan, and this was another area that was affected by fuel supply issues, fuel costs as well, which is a typical issue that we see. The typically we are running off of diesel generators in these remote, difficult to reach areas, but then as fuel prices have risen, that creates strain on operating budgets and also provides really a lot of uncertainty about that fuel supply. So this was another project that was done recently. Here, I've put together a few slides, kind of a case study, and we won't really have time to dig into this too much, but this is along the same lines in terms of what was the problem statement here. The location is northern Nigeria, Borno State, which has been affected by conflict with Boko Haram and all the migration and displacement that has resulted in. And so in northern Nigeria, IOM manages not one, but actually 9 humanitarian hubs all across this area. And these have largely relied on diesel fuel to keep them running. And they provide this critical service that I talked about before. In 2022, fuel prices started to spike significantly. Not only that, but just the challenge of getting fuel into these locations became more and more difficult. In many cases, we're flying in fuel via helicopters, or fuel needs to be stored on a military compound. There needs to be a military escort in order to get that fuel to the site. And so it's a natural case for solarization. And especially when the fuel prices are so high, when we do an economic analysis and a financial analysis, we see actually that the paybacks, in this case, the payback was in the neighborhood of 4 years. So it's really an attractive, it's a no-brainer, especially in these kind of situations. So theoretically, it's a no-brainer, but then actually making it happen, especially in, again, these difficult displacement settings, that's the challenging part. And being able to also do it in a tight time frame. Here we had to execute within 1 year, or we have to. Actually, this project is just starting right now due to donor requirements and things like that. So therefore, we need to engage additional resources, and we have some consultants helping us with this, making sure that we can actually go through the whole process, which I'll go through very quickly here. Step one, energy needs assessment. So looking at what are the biggest loads, what are the biggest uses of energy. And in the case of these hubs, because they're accommodation, they're guest houses in a place like Nigeria during the summer, especially the cooling and AC, the cooling load makes up over 70% of the load, which is its own challenge. But anyway, step one, looking at doing the energy needs assessment by kind of in a professional way. Step two, this is really an important point that we have been trying to stress in our decarbonization projects. Prior to actually investing a single dollar in transition to renewable energy, the lowest cost energy available is energy conservation and energy efficiency. And so strategically, we try to implement energy efficiency strategies before moving on to the renewable energy systems and replacing diesel with renewables. So this is a really critical part, and it requires some staff behavior changing, educating staff on on sound energy management practices, shifting and replacing some of our appliances to more efficient ones, looking at the procurement process. So, when we're replacing some significant appliances, making sure that we're looking at the total cost of ownership and not just procuring the cheapest, the one that has the cheapest upfront cost, but rather looking at how much energy it consumes in total, and doing a regular management of the critical loads. After that, we get to step three. So I think I clicked something here. Step three, understanding renewable energy options. So, here we get into the more technical part, and we have grid-connected sites versus off-grid sites, and so that we have to adjust accordingly. And there's a need to look at how does battery storage integrate into how does battery storage integrate, and looking at the whole system design. This is before we actually put this out as an expression of interest and an RFP out to the community. We do our own internal study, and as well as technical and financial analysis, to understand what are our primary needs in terms of energy, and to estimate what does the system look like. And the fourth and final stage here is really the after service part, and so that's about management and maintenance of the energy systems once they have been commissioned, once they've been installed. And this is where the humanitarian system really struggles sometimes, because we've seen very often traditional procurements that lead to maybe that leads to systems that are non-performing, especially 1 year after, 2 years after, because there is a lack of proper management and maintenance and oversight. So part of this is about building capacity locally, but also, more importantly, ensuring that there is always a company that's contracted to ensure that the solar system is fully operational. And if not, there's also other ways to do this, such as looking at ways to procure energy as a service. So I'll just leave it there. And I know we are short on time, so I'm going to try to keep moving quickly. The second part of the presentation is focused on plastic waste management. And here we have just a few examples to highlight. In Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, plastic waste has been a growing problem, and especially ever since the influx of migrants in 2017. So this has created environmental damage and risks to the surrounding waterways and natural ecosystems. It has choked waterways and roads in the already heavily congested camps. And when the monsoons come, drainage systems frequently clog. You add a bunch of plastic waste and non-degradable polyurethane bags, and all of a sudden you have major clogging issues, major stagnant water, and breeding grounds for disease. So this is the backdrop and to a project that IOM undertook recently to create a plastic recycling center. Today, this center processes 65 kilograms of plastic waste per day, and including approximately almost 25,000 polyurethane plastic bags. These are all collected by camp residents. Each household has been provided with 2 bins for sorting their waste, one for organic waste and another one for non-biodegradable. And so we have actually empowered the community and kind of explained about the benefits of managing waste in the proper way. And today, now that this center has been operational for some time, we are taking this discarded plastic waste, including beverage bottles, plastic bags, and other types of packaging, and turning it into useful products for the community, including colorful letter blocks for as a learning aid for children in the schools and informal classrooms in the camp. Different building materials, even like pavement slabs, latrine pit cover slabs, and other types of products. So this is actually something that we're quite excited about, seeing how this continues to grow and make an impact.
Thank you so much, Adam. That's very interesting. I'm afraid we'll have to skip the next example on plastics, but I think it was a very engaging, and I really appreciate the technical level of info. The slides are available to everybody, and I believe now Agnes is back, and I'll apologize for those technical difficulties, Agnes. But if I've already introduced you, so I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Wonderfully, yes.
Okay. Sorry for this technical issue. First of all, thank you for inviting us, and sorry for not being able to be with you today. Yes, just a few words on WIPO. WIPO is the world. It's a global forum for IP, intellectual property. That means that we manage this issue, services policy, and cooperation on trademark, patents, or copyright, for example. We have WIPO has about more than 1,500 employees, and mainly based in Geneva. Yes, first slide is just to put the just. I mean, we will not go through these slides because all of you are really aware of the urgent necessity to act, and just please go ahead, and we will just explain the long road and the long journey of the WIPO environmental strategy. We start in 2009, a long time ago now, and the first step was working on carbon neutrality and carbon only on energy and carbon aspect. Since 2014, we are WIPO is carbon neutral. We have set all available emissions. The our policy and our journey is based on two frameworks. I would say the UN framework as well as local and host country framework, and more recently, we are part of 2050 Today that help us to deal with local and actions and issues in Geneva and in the Council. Very more recently, we have a new environmental policy since 2022. And now we are in the stage of implementing an environmental management system, which is one of the UN requirements to have this EMS in place before 2025. Next slide, please. I can share with you a few illustrations on what strategic choices made for WIPO campus. And now for a long time, they are part of our strategy when we make renovation or when we build new part of the building. We have several plants, garden on the roofs. We have changed all the lightings in the campus. We are cooled with the GLN and plan to use GLN for heating as well. Since 2015, we have a contract and we buy some renewable energy with the LCG. They are parts of some strategic choice of the campus. And next slide, please. These choices and what we have implemented since more than 10 years now have been a great impact on most of our energy consumption. You can have a few examples of the reductions in terms of electricity. We have reduced by 30%. Water consumption is as well a great achievement. Yes, we try as well to manage heating and cooling as much as we can, but sometimes it's also due to variation of weather conditions, and it's more complicated to manage, but we do our best. More recently, and especially in terms of heating, we have changed our policy, and we have reduced by 1 degree the heating temperature, and that has been able to achieve about 30% of energy reduction for heating, which is a great achievement last year. Next slide, please. Greenhouse gas is also something we look at, and before COVID, travel was the main environmental impact for WIPO, and that was about 60-70% of the total of greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, due to COVID, we reduced that, but now our great challenge is to keep this level of travel, which is something which will be the challenge in the coming year, even if we have more and more virtual meetings or at least hybrid meetings. We continue to need to meet people and to organize meetings, but it's something that we have to be focused on, and to maybe to develop new policy to continue to reduce our emissions. Yes. Next slide, please. Yes, and maybe a few words to complete and just to to summarize this journey and the experience of implementing this the environmental management system, I think what is key is really to have this vision and leadership commitments. That's the first most important. And what is difficult is to find the right argument to drive change. The human aspect is as well something important, because the action needs to be think as a global. We need to think global and to act locally. We have to, I very often say, yes, we have to turn constraint into opportunities and try to be as much innovative as we can. And maybe at least also something very important is to accept, to check, to test, and take action as much as we can. Yes, this is a short summary of our experience in WIPO. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I could ask the presenter to go back to the previous slide. I just wanted to look at it again. I think it's very insightful, and I'm quite grateful for that, because I feel it summarizes the work of Sun quite well, and all of the role of focal points. And what we're trying to achieve is be all in this together, all of us in it together, but each of us has to go back and act, and that we are working to improve the tools that we have in our hands to go out and take action. So I'm very grateful for this quite nice summary, and curious if any other reactions or questions from those in the room or online. Okay, I think it's deep. It's a deep thought, so sometimes take time to percolate. So thank you very much, Agnes, for your presentation. And we have the opportunity now, and I'm very grateful for Dominic Grace, Deputy Director of Finance and Administration. He's also the head of Global Mobility and Infrastructure with the UN High Commission on Refugees. He very kindly adapted his schedule to attend and present for us here at Greening the Blue. And I'll turn it over to you, Dominic. Maybe I don't have your bio. I apologize for that. If you want to give a brief introduction, please go ahead. I think we have your slide ready.
Right. Great, thanks. Yep. So my name's Dominic Grace. I've worked for bio-wise, I've worked for various agencies. I spent 16 years with WFP at headquarters and also in the field, places like Afghanistan, Angola, etc. I worked then for about 10 years in New York as the Director of Sourcing and Operations for UNDP. And then I was involved in the UN reform program, the BIG, and then about 3 years ago, I was hired by UNHCR as Deputy Director of Finance and Admin, and to head up Global Mobility and Infrastructure, which looks after all of the things in UNHCR that produces CO2. So that's fleet, buildings, travel, etc., etc. I can see a lot of myself on the screen, but not too much of my presentation. Yeah, thanks, much better. If you could press the spacebar maybe a couple of times, and that's perfect. Great. Okay, so I'm going to keep this really short. I'm sure you've had quite a long session so far. So I really want to talk about any discussion of CO2 reduction, etc. really needs to start off with data. And this is why Greening the Blue is so critically important. We need on an annual basis to update where we are. We can't drive our interventions and our CO2 reduction based on what people think and the various anecdotes and stories that are out there. We need to measure, and it's only by measuring that we can manage. So I value the Greening the Blue exercise very highly, and I commit a lot of resources from UNHCR in order to meet it. We have something like 98% of our offices worldwide respond to Greening the Blue. So we're getting data from every single office in UNHCR. The way we deal, and what is the benefit of this, apart from also knowing exactly what our CO2 footprint is, where it's sitting, and it's not at a country level, it's at an office level. As you can see from the top left side, we actually saved very tangibly $62,000 because we are refining our CO2 emissions, and therefore we spend less money on offsetting them through carbon credit purchases. So it's got a very tangible, it pays for itself in a way. Okay, so I'm just going to talk very briefly about the greening the blue. How do we get the data? So on step one, the world sort of icon down there, we've rolled out a system to all of our all of our offices worldwide. We have 550 plus offices worldwide. We rolled out a system called Unifier, which is a facilities management system. So in Unifier, we know where our offices are, how big they are, how many square feet, what leasing costs they, what the leasing cost is, how many staff we've got there, and we've also got data on generators, fuel storage, and all the rest of it. We've also adapted Unifier, which is an Oracle product. We've adapted it so that we capture our greening the blue data directly into Oracle. So all of our 550 offices log into Oracle, log into Unifier, and enter their data. And we've trained over 550 focal points to do that. Once we have that initial round of greening the blue data in there, we have an algorithm which is run on the data, and it looks at the data and it makes sure that the data is credible. So it's a little bit like a blood test. You know, you've got your cholesterol level. Your cholesterol should fall between this value and that value. And if it's way off, if it's 1,000, then clearly there's something wrong. You've got dirty data, you've got misleading data. So we run sort of a identification of forensic cleansing on the data to make sure our data is as accurate as possible. We then we participate in the bring your own emissions sort of option when it comes to greening the blue. So we purchased, I think through UNEP, maybe we did it ourselves, through the International Energy Agency, IEA, we purchased the sort of a translation table that says, you know, if you've got this much fleet, if you've got this much travel, and refrigerants, etc., this converts into CO2 and other indicators used in the Greening the Blue report. So we calculate, rather than burdening UNEP with this, we calculate our own emissions based on this IEA standards that you know we're using previously. So this is sort of how we get to our greening the blue data, and again, you know, very valuable for us to have a heat map and to be able to see where the problems lie, so that we can target our interventions and our investments in renewable energy. On step 4, we also we partially automate the data collection. So for example, two things that we've been working on very intensively. One is the green box, which I think maybe I've mentioned quite a few times in different forums, but the green box, we've rolled it out to all of our offices, and it's a system which is also used by UNDP and WFP and other agencies, UNICEF. You basically clip it onto your power system in an office, and it tells you how many kilowatts per hour you're consuming, and then that links up to a centralized database. So we can remotely, with this sensor, we can remotely measure and look at patterns over time, because there's climatic variations, all the rest of it, seasonal variations. We can look at exactly how many kilowatts per hour of energy we're using in every single office around the world. And we've also mapped this onto a pretty funky globe where you can, it's represented in a 3D way, and you can sort of zoom in and see every office. We also have tracking, satellite tracking on the majority of our vehicles, so we can also calculate how many kilometers they've traveled, and using these sort of manufacturer provided fuel per kilometers, we can calculate how much fuel they've burnt. So we provide our country offices, our offices, with their data, with how much electricity they've used and how many liters of fuel they burnt during that year, and they can validate that if they wish. The other thing that we do is collaborative information sharing. So in 2023, we facilitated 3 online workshops, 3 virtual online workshops. One was focusing on fleet, one was focusing on travel, which is one of the hardest nuts to crack in this sector, and the other one was focusing on HQ buildings. And then we had a 4th session, which was organized with counterparts in Germany, BMZ, etc. And that was really focusing on the footprint in the field, which is probably the largest single emissions for the UN family in general. So we organized this workshop in Berlin, which we thought was very productive. It was a big sort of show and tell, and how can we collaborate? And from that, we've had spin-offs. So we've got a green box, which is called the PCCM. We've got a green box working group that talks about how we can use green boxes in other locations, and also engages with the supplier and manufacturer of the green box to optimize it. So we do the collaborative information sharing around the green box. And then finally, and equally importantly, so from steps 1 to 5, we've talked about how to get really good quality data and really analyze the problem and get the sort of the foundational piece in there. And then in step 6, I really haven't got a big slide on this, but we've done a lot. We use this data to implement solarization of our offices in the field. And we've made a lot of progress. We've raised probably, $34 million, I think it is, $34 million, so that we don't have to go to country offices and say, you've got a problem, you need to pay for this, but we can help you, because that doesn't get too much positive reception from country offices. So we come with the problem, we've defined the problem, and we've also got the financing mechanism for this. So practically, in terms of implementing solarization, we have a lot of sites which we're hoping that will go live in 2024. So just to go through a quick list, one of our biggest sites is Kakuma in Kenya. I mean, that's something like 850 kilowatt peak, so it's a big solar installation. This will come online in the next few weeks. We've got Yumbe and Adjumani in Uganda, also reasonably big refugee camps. Melkadida in Ethiopia is enormous. Again, it's the same size as Kakuma, 850. And then we've got Dadaab also in Kenya, again, a very big site. In addition to that, we have work currently underway. This isn't a planning session. This is actually where we've already done the technical assessment, and we're either doing the procurement or we're delivering the project. And we've got projects underway currently in Nigeria, in Lebanon, Mauritania, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Niger, Iran, and South Africa. So we've got a lot of projects to solarize offices and move away from fossil fuel, which will come online in 2024, and obviously 2025 is also is planned out as well. And then we've got technical assessments. So our team has got 4 to 5 roving renewable energy engineers, and we do all of the assessments. We do TFA, technical feasibility assessment, to make sure. And frustratingly, our biggest problem with solarizing buildings is how big their roof is. It's very frustrating, but there's only so many solar panels you can fit on a building. And this is our biggest constraint. So we talk about a renewable energy fraction. So maybe on a good day, 50%, 60%, 70%, but it's rarely 100%, which is why we have to continue with generators, unfortunately. We're currently running technical assessments in Chad, in Afghanistan, in South Sudan, which I believe is just being finished. And then we're looking in Iran, Egypt, Syria, and Uzbekistan. These are technical assessments that have just started. So really, I mean, again, the big picture for us is it all starts off with the measurement, the green box measurement, the vehicle tracking measurement is critically important, but so is the greening the blue annual assessment, to do a reality check of where we are and to make sure our interventions are having an effect. And so far, from the 2022 greening the blue, we've reduced our CO2 emissions by 5%. But as these different sites, such as Kakuma and Melkadida that I just mentioned, come online, we expect our CO2 emissions to significantly go down as we switch over to renewable energy. So that's really it. Very short, and hopefully I covered stuff that's interesting to you. Back to you, Jakob. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And it's quite nice to see how you're using data to drive these tangible changes, with measurable impacts, like you're mentioning the kilowatt hours you're saving, the reductions of generator use, et cetera. It's very inspiring, and it is also where we're working with all the focal points, WIPO, IOM, and others to begin to really take the Greening the Blue data and turn it into something that can be used to support more interactive discussions with senior management to drive decisions. It's such an excellent example of doing just that, and I'm grateful for your time. Do we have any questions or comments or ideas from the room? Yes.
Hi, I am Mohit Chaubey. I am from the Geneva Graduate Institute. Second year master's students there. My question was for Mr. Dominic. And it was when you mentioned that you are using a green box and other methods to calculate energy emissions, then are you also considering what is the source of that energy? Is it coming from renewables or from coal plants or from natural gas? And then what are the emission factors corresponding to the specific to the location where you are operating or sourcing your energy from? Because that will also vary from location to location and technology to technology. So thank you.
Yeah, great question. Yes, we consider the sources. I mean, it's very surprising. If you go to Wikipedia, there's a fantastic table that was created by Irina, which is a Dubai-based, I think it's a company, and they tell you how much renewable energy is being produced in all of the countries. And it's really amazing. I mean, Ethiopia, we know it's going to be 100% renewable energy very soon. But countries like DRC, Uganda, Kenya, I mean, all of these countries that we're working in and that we have these problems in and we have many generators in, are using renewable energy, typically hydroelectric power. But the issue, obviously, there's two issues. One is the stability of green grids in these countries, and the other one is the reach of the network. So they don't reach out to places, certainly for UNHCR, where we have cross-border refugee camps or other offices. They don't reach out that far, so it's very frustrating. So absolutely, we monitor the kilowatts, and we also send engineers to do an energy audit to look at exactly where that power is coming from. So yeah, we took the box. I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the second part of your question.
It is that I was trying to focus on the emissions factor part. Apart from like directly sourcing your energy from different renewable or non-renewable sources, it was also about whether you are factoring that while calculating your emissions footprint.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we basically it's kind of a mix of the two. Sometimes it's green energy, sometimes it's fossil fuel, but our energy experts do that analysis and figure it out. But ultimately, when we convert our offices to renewable energy, there's going to be probably a 30 to 40% reliance on generators. So we try and mitigate that by using batteries. Obviously, that's a key part of a solarization of an office, but batteries also don't have a great life. They last for up to 10 years, and then you have to dispose of them correctly, and you have to replace them as well. And they're probably the most expensive part of the system. So this is something that we have to live with, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from the room? Otherwise, I think we can close. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Just one comment from my side. I would like to thank the Geneva Environment Network for organizing the event and the Sustainable United Nations team for the important work that has been done. We welcome very much the report that you have published. It is also for Switzerland something important that we look at, as Diana said at the beginning, with an initiative which is called 2050 Today, that we did in partnership with the Canton and Republic of Geneva, the City of Geneva, and the University of Geneva, and the Industrial Service of Geneva. So all the level from the political to the technical level are involved, and that there are 60 plus members of this initiative from the International Geneva, from permanent missions to international organizations or private sectors, academia, who are part of this effort. And in the spirit of always improving the work that we're doing, as you are also doing, that would be also interesting for 2050 today to exchange also maybe with you, with the Sustainable United Nations team, on what has been your different challenges and how you're progressing, and the different objectives and strategies that you are implementing and you have in mind for the following years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to make an intervention after this inspiring and so kind of closing remark. But from a French point of view, I would like to, first of all, to thank all of you for organizing this work and this meeting. And I'm really happy to see that we have nice examples from the humanitarian agencies, for instance, but also WIPO and many others. So environment and climate are a challenge for all. And it's good that the UN system shows the way and shows that it is tackling the problem, the issue, not only saying what should be done in the countries, but also giving an example of what can be done in our agencies and in our events. So I think it's important, and also the exercise of transparency and showing what happens and what are our emissions, even if they are not perfect. It's good, and it helps moving forward. I noted that the environmental agencies are not the best, do not have the best results. I will come back to this and just to sort it out why, but it's interesting. No, thank you very much. And yes, we encouraged concrete actions, especially in Geneva, as my Swiss colleague said, for instance, with this organism 2050. And so see you at next steps, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. And thank you to France and Switzerland as well for the leadership. I mean, with the Paris Agreement, it's something that we all strive for. And the 2050 today is really a source of inspiration with the breadth of issues that it's working on, commuting, food, et cetera. It's a depth of resource, and we look forward to those dialogues. With that, I'd like to thank the speakers as well. If they're online, and really appreciate your comments. We have, like as they've said repeatedly, everything will be shared. We look forward to a lot of bilateral follow-ups with IOM and WIPO, UNHCR, and special thanks to Beth Patfield, our communications consultant, who has always tirelessly worked behind the scenes to deliver now 4 of these reports, which have been so well received. She's usually quite quiet in the background, but I'm pointing her out because next week is her last week with us, and we're gonna miss her very, very much, and are very grateful for her tireless efforts. With that, I return the mic and the staff to our colleagues with the Geneva Environment Network. Thank you.
We, of course, join you in thanking everybody, also the attendees who have joined us online and in the room. It's now time for those who are in the room to share a cup of coffee and eat what is here. But I want to echo what some member states had said this morning about maybe if you have recommendations, those of you who are not even the focal points, but the focal points, I know you meet regularly, at least once a month. But the others who don't have the opportunity to engage that much with this team, if you have recommendations on how you would like to see the next report, also because we come soon to the midterm review of the sustainable strategy of the United Nations. So any remarks are welcome. And as I mentioned at the beginning, for those who were late, this morning there were suggestions from member states to include recommendations in the next report. So I think that's could be part of the exchanges here. And for those who are online who cannot join us in this networking moment, if you have any comments, don't hesitate to leave them in the chat or in the Q&A box. And with that, we hope to see you at some of the upcoming events. And I think we have a slide also announcing them. We have a lot coming up on plastics, but we have also the 50th session of the Human Rights Council starting soon, and with a lot of environment to be addressed there also. Thank you very much.